We have an amazing group of panelists here. I would say this is like the star-studded event. I'm so excited to hear what these group of leaders have to say. And thank you everyone for sharing for where you guys are from. So nice to meet everyone. I am Bernice. I am the co-founder of Asians in Advertising, and Jessalyn Lamb is also on the call. We are so excited for you guys to be here. We are going to include a deck in the channel. This is our matchmaking networking deck. This is only accessible to people in this call. This is a place for you guys to network, to find mentorship. We do this at all our events. So we highly encourage you guys to find someone that you can connect with here. I know our networks are all so small because, you know, there's so little visibility of Asians at our actual workplaces that it's nice to kind of see other people and be able to connect with them. And I'm going to hand this, actually, I'm going to read what our organization is about. Asians in Advertising strives to develop a free community, create opportunities, and help elevate Asians to higher leadership positions, to make space for Asians within the advertising community to come together in a place where we're often excluded, connecting with each other in order to advance their goals, careers, artistic and personal growth, help answer questions, offer advice, and have discussions about the issues that the Asian community faces as a whole in our creative careers. And I'm going to throw this over to Jessalyn for her to introduce our amazing group of speakers.
Great, thanks, Bernice. Hi, everyone. And I also put the networking deck in the chat, so you can fill that out to connect with the attendees. So I'm Jessalyn Lamb, co-founder of Asians in Advertising, and actually have to update the networking deck because I started a new job this week. I'm the VP of Member Development and Diversity at Interactive Advertising Bureau. Super happy to be here, and it's really great that we have over 100 people. So it's great to see that. And I'm happy to introduce our speakers. So the first one I'll have is Michelle, and I'm going to pin you as I introduce you.
Is this where you want me to do a quick intro?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Tang. I'm the CMO at Digitas. I oversee growth, marketing, and PR and comms for us in North America. It's great to be here.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And next we have is Cathy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cathy Butler. I'm the CEO of Organic, which is a digital-first creative agency within Omnicom. Thank you for having me.
Great, welcome. And then next up is Ashish.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashish Prashar. I'm the global CMO at RGA. I'm based in New York. Thank you for having me here. This is going to be a real fun panel and talking to all of you.
Great, welcome. And then next is Bill.
Hello, everyone. Bill Imada. I'm the chairman and founder of IW Group. We're part of McCann in the Interpublic group. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great, we definitely are too. And then our last speaker we have is Jatinda.
Hi, I'm Jatinda Singh. I'm the Chief Data Officer for DDB, which is also part of the Omnicom Group. I'm responsible for all things data, tech, data science across our global footprint.
Great, thank you, and welcome to all the speakers. So also just as a reminder for everyone attending, we'll have the Q&A near the end. So as questions pop up from what you hear from the speakers, feel free to put in the chat and we'll keep track of that to do Q&A near the end. So the first question I have is for Michelle. So thank you again for mentioning Asians in Advertising in your campaign article that you wrote earlier this year about We Belong in the C-Suite. It was a really great article where you mentioned actions to push beyond the model minority stereotype. Could you share more on your own journey into the C-suite?
Sure. It's really funny because I was mentioning the Ascend campaign as we were all joining on, and I was actually sharing it yesterday in a recorded forum, which is the strangest thing ever, to be in front of the camera. Very different from our usual behind the camera mode. You know, and one of the stories I shared was I grew up in New York. I'm still based here in New York. I grew up in a very traditional Taiwanese immigrant family. So total tiger mom, whole deal. And as I grew up, I've always been taught, right? Culturally, we're taught, don't speak up, don't rock the boat, like, don't upset anybody. It's all about saving face. And for the first 10 years of my career, and for those of the folks on the panel who know me, they'll be shocked to hear this. For the first 10 years of my career, I never spoke up in meetings, not once. And it was because even if I didn't agree, even if I had an opinion, I didn't want to step out and feel like I was saying something I shouldn't have. But on the flip side, strategically, I put myself in a role at an agency that was super visible, right? Like from a new business point of view. So I was a junior new business person. And when you're the new business person, you're the one who everyone sees because you're working on pitches, you work 100 hours a week. And I did that and I grinded it out for years and was able to get promoted because of it. And I will never forget the first time I stepped into a C-suite role, I was super excited. And it happened at the same time with a couple others who were stepping into a C-suite role at the same time. And what was interesting is when you have a new team forming and coming together, very quickly, the easiest way to bond as a team is to find a common enemy. And when you're the only woman of color on that team, you become that common enemy. So my first C-suite role, I was so proud of myself. I called my mom, I called my dad. I was so excited. And then 6 months in, you realize the microaggressions on every single meeting, the questioning of my decisions and how I did things. And I still didn't really speak up for myself. I kind of was like, oh, maybe it's just in my head, whatever. Shortly after that, I had a situation where my son got sick. He had a 25-minute seizure at daycare. He was 18 months old, scared. And he was in the hospital for a couple days. I got back, I took 2 days off of work to take care of him. He's fine now. I got home, went to work the next day, and I was pulled aside and told, you need to prioritize your work. And that was the moment when I decided it's not worth it to not speak up for myself, right? It's not worth your family. It's not worth anything. And from that moment on, I left that job a week later. And now every chance I get, I think I speak out about the challenges I think Asians face in the workplace, both from a microaggression, things coming at us, as well as what we kind of grow up with and what we hold on to from a culture point of view. Which is why when Jessalyn and Bernice started this, I was so excited to participate, because it really is about visibility and hearing about the stories and recognizing what we see in the workplace to be able to counter it and speak up and stand out for ourselves.
I love that. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us and reminding everyone to really find that voice to speak up for yourself. It's really powerful, and I'm even trying to channel that too in my new role. So the next question is even to Ashish of you have an extraordinary past in justice reform and in politics, and it'd be great for you to share how you made your way into advertising.
Yeah, mine is a unusual route, right? So I don't have all the corporate history, and you didn't face all of the challenges that I know the business world puts out against you. But I for those who don't know, I was formerly incarcerated at 17. Yeah, I grew up in London. I was incarcerated for a year. I was sentenced to a year in a young offenders institute in London. But weirdly, that whole thing was, I wouldn't say the experience of prison wasn't a blessing, but the post life after prison was a blessing, because I got my first job, I would argue, at somewhere which is probably regarded as more criminal now, at News Corp. You know, my first boss out of prison was Andy Coulson. For those who don't know, he went ironically to prison for phone hacking a decade later. But you know, he saw me as he just saw me for me, right? He didn't see me for the record. He didn't see me for the scarlet letter on my back. He didn't see me for all the potential hurdles that could get in the way of my life. He saw me for a young person who was looking for a new shot at life. And it's crazy because, you know, when I think about where we are today, still a lot of opportunities people of color get are like given to someone, right? They're not like, it's not, the system doesn't allow for us to always succeed, right? It's not like we don't have the same opportunities equally across everything. And it's always like that mentor that might break you through. And this is a white working class guy in London who saw something different. I went with him into politics, as you mentioned. I probably worked for all the worst and best people, depending on what side of the aisle you sit. I worked for both conservatives and people on the left. And people say to me today, how could you work for conservatives? And it goes back to that thing about opportunity, right? So I followed a boss who didn't give a shit about his criminal record, who didn't give a shit about my criminal record. And I went with him to go work for like Boris Johnson. And for all the Brits on here, I'm really sorry. He's fucked up the UK. And, you know, I served as press secretary for years before finding my own voice. And this is the most important thing. I knew as biding my time to actually be able to get to a point where I had enough privilege to pick my own bosses, right? And to pick my own life, right? Working the grind, like you mentioned, Michelle, like just doing what you had to do, your time, for lack of a better term, to get enough privilege and awareness to pick the work you want to do. And I came out here to work on the first Obama campaign, and I met someone who ended up putting me in the White House, you know, and it transformed my life. I worked in the VP's office. I only ended up in advertising in 2018. You know, I spent most of my life campaigning and working on elections and being a press secretary. And it's a skill set I think is amazing to get here. But I think it gave me, you know, I think people in business look at that as like, it gets you straight into where you want to be in the corporate place, right? So you worked in the White House, you worked in Downing Street. Even with my record, and even with how outspoken I am, I've been blessed because those opportunities removed my color, which I fight to keep, but it's ironic because it's like, oh, you worked in these places, so you must be amazing at what you do. And also the other work you mentioned I do is in the justice space, which is, you know, I think one of the hottest topics of the last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything else. I mean, you know, I've worked for the last 10 years to abolish prisons, you know, and to me, it's some of the most important work in the world because I think a lot of people forget, you know, everyone goes to me, you know, it's a lot of people here still think it's a Black issue. And I'm like, no, it impacts us all, right? Until everybody's free, none of us are really free, right? And I sit here and think, you know, the biggest thing that white supremacy has done to all of us, right, has like divided us like into buckets. Even the group Asian, right? Look how diverse we are as a fucking population. But like sitting on this panel and all the people listening, our solidarity is what will change everything, right? And I give this example a lot in the talks I give around justice reform. I would love to know how many of you know who Yuri Kochiyama is without Googling her. Yeah, she is a Japanese American radical who was Malcolm X's best friend, but you don't hear about that. You get the sanitized version of even Malcolm X, who is considered like the enemy. You get the sanitized version. Like, you don't get the solidarity that the Asian community and Black community and other communities have done side by side since the 60s to try and transform the opportunities that we have today. That's how I live my life. To ask how to get in the C-suite, it's to not close the door to my fellow people because they're not exactly, you know, I go up with my Black brothers and sisters and my Asian brothers and sisters. We're all one, like, to me, we're a group of people, right? Because we have been put in boxes and they try, and my career has I was blessed with opportunities by an old white world, but at some point you have to look around you and think you can't be the only one in that room, right? So you can't be the only one who's getting these opportunities. So my whole career after that political switch to corporate was to bring all my people with me. And, you know, and that's what I strive to do at RGA. I mean, I'm privileged to work with Bernice, and the work she does with Asians in advertising is phenomenal, but we have so much more to do.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. You have such a unique story, so it's really great for everyone to be able to hear that. And definitely agree with that. When you're at the C-suite, it's great that you're lifting other people up to be leaders, especially for the next generation. It's really important. So thank you for sharing that. And the next question I have is for Jatinda. Congrats for being recognized as the 2021 Adweek Pride Star that honors leaders across media, tech, and marketing who identify as LGBTQ+. So when I was reading about it, you mentioned that it starts with visibility as an LGBT executive. So how do you know when to be more visible, especially that you're in C-suite? Do you pick and choose when to speak up more? I know Michelle was even talking about when you're finding your voice. I'd love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, no, and a great question, and thanks again for inviting me to the panel. I think yes, I mean it's situational for sure, and I think it's even small things as well. You know, as just having conversations about, oh well, what did you do this weekend? You know, last weekend with your family, and as people are describing their families, is just to sort of like put yourself in there in a real situation and sort of talk about, you know, myself, my husband, in that as part of that situation as well. So nothing forced, but just like anybody else would talk about their partner, their husband, their spouse, their children, is just introducing that into everyday language. So, you know, that sort of like is how I'm starting. And I have to say, I feel very, very honored to be amongst such a group of amazing LGBTQ plus, you know, leaders. I looked, I was like, wow, you know, there's Dan Levy and there's Billy Porter and many, many others in there. And somehow I managed to make it in as well. But, you know, visibility to me starts by being your true, authentic self. And, you know, like many of the panelists and the 120 plus that I see that have joined today, you know, we're multifaceted. So, you know, being an LGBTQ leader in our industry is but one dimension. You know, you can hear from the accent, I'm also British and I'm also Indian. So there's many layers, you know, to all of us. And it's how do we bring all of that to, you know, to the conversation as well. So sometimes it's actually sort of like, you know, vocalizing being an LGBT person. Sometimes it's vocalizing having an Indian heritage. A couple of examples from that, you know, I've had last year a very senior executive ask me, what does my name mean in my language? And I thought that was a really interesting question. And I'm not going to reveal the gender, but would they have asked that question of a white person with a name like John or Jim or Jenny? Probably not. And I also thought it was an interesting question. We speak 5 languages in our household, so which language did that individual actually mean? You know, similarly, I've had another very senior executive ask if I speak Indian as well, and I gave being a data geek, I gave a mathematical response. So I said, yes, I speak 9% Indian, 22 official languages in India. I speak 2, Hindi and Punjabi. So 2 divided by 22 is 9%. So, and I sort of like said, you know, there's 22 languages that are nationally recognized in India and that I speak to. So I was being somewhat facetious, but hopefully at the same point, educating the individual that there's no such thing as an Indian language. So again, I think it's, you know, building upon many of the points that, you know, the other speakers have said is just saying things and helping to educate people as well along the way. You know, I feel very honored and very blessed to be able to vocalize that on behalf of, you know, the many people that hopefully I represent and that I can bring along. That I feel that is, 1, a privilege, but 2, it's also a responsibility for me as well to do that for everyone else that's out there. And if I can make somebody else's life a little bit easier just by saying and doing some of those things, I'll do it.
That you said that it's your responsibility as leaders, because oftentimes it does become like the burden of like the people of color that have to like educate others. And I remember listening onto a panel that a leader was saying that, but it's part of leadership, like to be the
Yes.
one to say something, because if we don't say something, who else is going to? And it's just as many people as we can help by just speaking up really does make a big difference. And so my next question I have is for Bill. And thank you so much for being here. Like you definitely are a legend. I mean, you co-founded like IW Group 3 decades ago, and I'd love for you to share your foresight in terms of really just creating and growing like your agency and just your experience for the people in the audience to hear from you.
Well, frankly, I wish I had some foresight when I started the agency. Similar to the other panelists, there were a number of microaggressions before we even identified them as microaggressions that actually got me started, because I did take a different path, similar to Ashish, where I didn't want to go. Well, I tried to get into McCann, and I didn't get picked. So I was a very angry person for a very, very long time. And I decided I didn't want to go into advertising, screw advertising. And I went to HR and politics and all these other areas. And I ultimately decided that advertising would be the best place for me. So when I applied for a bunch of jobs, everybody kept saying, you're too old. And I said, a 26-year-old, I'm too old. And ultimately agreed to do a contract arrangement with one of the larger agencies. And all the microaggressions that happened were just amazing. People would walk up to me and say, hey, Bill, we have some Chinese people coming to the office today. What did Chinese people eat? And I said, I beg your pardon? Or Bill, do Cambodian people eat American food? And this happened a lot. And frankly, I got a little annoyed after a while. And one time the client, and this might happen to some of you, wanted to come and visit us at the agency, and there were over 100 people at the agency. And the client insisted on seeing diversity at the agency. Of course, I had a really bad cubicle along with the Latinx person that was in the mailroom, and I got elevated really quickly to a nice office for the day. And this particular executive from this company said, can I meet Bill and the other guy? And they said, absolutely. And then they didn't really want me to talk. And so the president of the company just kept saying, Bill is really active in the Asian community, he knows a lot about Asian communities. And this executive ended up saying, well, Bill, this is great. I used to live in Asia. I lived in Korea, I lived in India, Singapore, Japan. It was my favorite place to live. Where in Asia are you from? And I said, well, I am from the Far East, the far eastern part of Oregon. And so that's how it kind of got started. But then I think kind of like Michelle, I kind of kept my mouth shut for 10 years doing this. And I just, one day, I was talking to an elected person. He just said, Bill, I just want to say one thing. I love Asian people. You people are so quiet, so hardworking, so diligent. You're not like Black people. They cause trouble. And you're not like Latinos and Hispanics. They cause a lot of trouble. Asian people, you guys are calm. You don't get upset. You don't get pissed off. And I said, that pisses me off. And I think that led me to decide early on that I needed to start my own organization, something that I can control and manage, and not have all of these people kind of telling me who Asians are and what Asians are all about. So that's kind of how I got started, and I never looked back.
That's amazing. No, thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree with you about the foresight, because even with Asians in advertising here today, if you were asked me 5 years ago, I probably didn't know I would be the co-founder with Bernice. It's just when the need is there and the opportunity, wanting to create the solutions, because for us, Bernice and I were just tired of waiting for solutions to happen. So being part of it and having this community is important. So, and I wanted to move on. I know we have to move on to Q&A soon. So the next question I have is for Cathy. So it's great that you're proactively creating a space for the AAPI colleagues at Omnicom, and I would love for you to share how that's going as you're leveraging that in your role as CEO to support your community.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking, and thank you again for having me. A few co-founders and I earlier this year co-founded the OPMG API Collective, short name for OAC. And we all came together around the same time and decided there was no question that a collective was needed. And stepping back a little bit, I had really spent my entire career sort of being American in the workplace and Asian outside of the workplace, and being really comfortable having both of those identities. And when I joined Barbarian as the CEO there, I was surrounded by so many Asian people, Barbarian being owned by the Chael Holding Company, which is a Korean company, and actually felt a little bit out of sorts about it. Being Asian amongst other Asians was so new to me, having grown up in an industry where there just weren't that many people that looked like me, and being perfectly comfortable with that. But I came to realize that it was really a blessing at the moment that it happened. This was about 5 years ago. And realizing that the scale of my role and the impact that I felt committed to was really the impetus for driving more diversity in Barbarian as a commitment to myself, but also the world at large, so to speak, in a small industry. And when I joined Organic, I thought and knew and hoped and expected of myself that I could do better. And that I could, with the scale of Omnicom, do much more significant things. And so when the co-founders and I got together, it was sort of a no-brainer. I mean, listen to all of the challenges that this group has faced, continues to face, that everybody still needs a community, one, to share, but also two, to action together. And so that was the start of the OAC. What's interesting is that we all sort of had a first couple of really unstructured meetings, and we all said amongst ourselves, we didn't know we needed this as much as we did. This also coincided with the time of the Atlanta shooting. So there's a lot of raw emotion, a lot of need to collectively but virtually hold hands with each other. And it really was the best feeling. And I felt so seen and I felt so welcome that my role as CEO and having access to many other CEOs meant that I could talk about my experience, that I could say, hey, I'm taking Lunar New Year off. This is what we do for Lunar New Year. Meant I could say, hey, our people are really hurting, CEOs. You really need to reach out to them and check in on them because it's time that you need to be seen supporting us. And really speaking up, but at the same time, driving a lot of conversation about across their organizations, what they were doing to support API. So this is, work that continues. And, Jessalyn, having been part of the organization, that there is a very wide hunger and a big hunger for the mentorship, for the drive to learn, to see examples. And where I've spent my time talking with CEOs is around raising awareness of API leadership, very specifically. It's quite clear I'm the only CEO who is Asian amongst my peer set. And it's very obvious. And I spent a lot of time talking to my boss about that and asking him what he's going to do to change. But at the same time, as an individual, taking a lot of time and responsibility to make sure I'm door opening for people, that I am connecting wonderful young talent to great senior leaders in the organization so that we can bring our community up the ranks with us. And there's just so much more to do and also so little time in our industry, as you know, but the dedication is real and it's very, very important to the extent that a co-founder and I just started a live Instagram series called Courage to Rise. And it is really a focus on the intersection of culture and corporate America.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to move on to the question of career advice for the attendees for you to all answer, or we'll have a few of you answer this of like, what tips would you give to build your career for the C-suite? So in terms of how you got your path into the C-suite, what tips do you have for the audience who are looking to go that same path?
I'll jump in. I asked for it. I had a 15-minute meeting with a CEO of a company I was working for, and I didn't know why I landed 15 minutes with him, but I thought I'm going to take this opportunity and just go for it. And he said, oh, I've heard great things about you. I was pretty new to the company and just wanted to spend some time getting to know you. What are you trying to do here? And I said, I want to run the New York office. And he just flatly laughed in my face. And I will never forget that. And on my darkest days, that is where I draw my power and my energy from, because he didn't believe in me. And even when for me, it was the answer that I needed, and certainly not one that I wanted. But also I was quite clear about how much I could have an impact at that company. And when opportunity arose to leave, I did. And to add just a finer point on that, when I left, said CEO called me and said, listen, you're going to a terrible place. And when you decide that you've made a big mistake and you want to come back, I might consider having you back. And I've never looked back from there. I've had wonderful, great success that I'm incredibly proud of. And for me, it was the power of knowing what I wanted and asking for it that then has really transformed my energy as the CEO. I just don't have fear going into situations, negotiating client contracts, whatever, because I feel so emboldened by that particular moment in my career.
That's amazing. So everyone ask for what you want. Don't be afraid. The worst that can happen, you find another opportunity. Ashish, did you want to share?
No, I was just saying that 100% agree. You got to do it with your own voice. I mean, but also, again, because we are a community that I think about, you have to act as if it was possible to radically transform the world around you. and you have to do it all the time, because that, you know, if you want to just continue in the system that exists, they won't let you in. You know, and that's what drives me. I know they don't want to let you in, and people ask me what drives me all the time. It's like that supremacy is what drives me, because they've created me. You know, that I know now how radical I have to be to get to where I got to, and you've created me, and use that energy that you see that is actively trying to keep us from positions and stuff against that supremacy. Because to me, it makes sense. It makes more sense than ever for us to speak out, for us to ask for what we want, because there is no reason to be nice about it anymore. Like, we are, you know, I think Black people, you know, coin the phrase that we are the culture. All communities are the culture, right? All the ideas that you see in society come from everything that isn't like what, you know, all our industry has made billions of dollars of everyone else's culture. Billions of dollars of everyone else's culture, whether it be ours or an amalgamation of everyone on this panel and everyone watching, whether it be the Black culture, it's made billions. And, you know, it's time they pay it back, you know, and pay it back to the people who already work in their organizations, already in this industry. Give us the opportunity to lead this, because I think what you're already taking our ideas. So how can you imagine what we could do if we're running the show? So do not always find your voice. I completely agree, but act. My biggest thing there is act if you can radically transform the environment you're in, and don't stop, even if you see hurdles coming, because if you don't, if you stop at any moment, they'll use that as the moment to shut you down.
Well, actually, even speaking of hurdles, we get this question a lot about the struggles with imposter syndrome. Like, what are some of from the panelists, like tips on how you're overcoming that, or ways that the community can learn tips from you?
Yeah, I can maybe start off on that one, and then other panelists can join. Yeah, I mean, like, definitely, I mean, even rising up through the ranks, I'm like, am I good enough to be a VP? Am I good enough to be an SVP? So I think, you know, for me, at least, you know, it started earlier on in that conversation as well. And then getting into the C-suite, I think we all have those. Am I in the right place? Am I really in the corner office or the virtual corner office? So I definitely face that. And some days it's greater than others for sure. But I think, again, I check myself and go, who sat in this corner office before me? You know, and then sort of like, if I use that as a barometer, and I think, you know, I for sure hold myself to a very high standard and I always go in and go, I know I'm doing a better job, and it's usually the guy that sat in that chair before me. So, you know, if that was able to happen, then I'm definitely in the right place. And again, I think building upon Cathy's point is just ask, you know, and if you get no, then go elsewhere, because sort of like what we do is so invaluable and is so needed. And to just what was said there is, you know, we're part of the culture. This is ours. And we're not going anywhere.
I have to say, I agree with everyone, what they're saying about asking for what you want. That is critically important, but know what you want. And I think that's really important, you know, and going back a little bit to that last question, I didn't have a role model that was Asian American at the agency. I looked around the room and there were no people that looked like me, women or men. In fact, there were very few women. And I had to have a Latino mentor. And one day I went to that mentor and I said, can I have 20 minutes of your time? And he said, absolutely, make arrangements with my assistant, come on in. And what do you want to talk to me about? I want to get to know how successful you have become and how did you get there? So anyways, I get to the meeting at 8 o'clock, you know, perpetuating these stereotypes about being on time. He lets me in right at 8 sharp and have this great conversation with him. And I said, and he's telling me, call this person, talk to this person. These are the things that you need to do. And at 8:20, he looked at his watch and he said, it's time for you to get out. And I said, what happened? Why are you kicking me out? And he said, get out. And while I was walking out, he said, Mr. Imada, you asked for 20 minutes. I gave you the 20 minutes. And now it's time for you to leave. And I said, but that was just a figure of speech. And he goes, I don't give a crap. He goes, your people, meaning Asian Americans, you guys are a bunch of wimps. ask for what you want. And don't be afraid. So I was really excited when I heard Cathy say that, and everybody else saying this, is that you really do need to ask for what you want, but it's important to know what you want and ask for those things. And so I'm really heartened by that conversation. But I also want to say that if people feel this imposter syndrome, channel that energy somewhere else. And I feel that a lot, by the way. My success, I worry about that a little bit. How did I get here? But now I'm channeling it and making sure that other people find the success as well. So when you channel that energy into something really positive, then you can wash all that stuff away because you are there for a reason. You deserve to be there. And so other people also deserve to get there. And if you can pave that way, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, I've got two things to add on to that. One is, once I figured out what I want, I actually really struggled speaking up for what it was. Similar to Jatinda, always kind of questioned, like, am I good enough, etc. And one day, I don't know, someone said to me, you know, Michelle, you just need to practice, right? So then I started looking at every opportunity as just an opportunity to practice. Practice asking for a higher salary, practice asking for a bigger job. And if you, somehow that flipped a switch in my mind to be able to now ask for something, because if I framed it as just practice in my head, it took the risk out of it a little bit, right? So that was one thing. And then the second thing, Bill, I think you talked about in terms of like finding a mentor, I think has been really, really important. We don't have a lot of those to look up to in our industry, frankly, at least not yet. So for example, with Jatinda and I actually met, what was it now, like three or 4 years ago on a pitch. We didn't know each other. We both, funny enough, sat at the back of the room on a pitch kickoff with 60 people in it, kind of bonded on that day and then went from there. So I say find your allies in every room, but also find the people who can become peer mentors to you if there isn't a senior mentor to look forward to look up to rather, because I think sharing the experience is part of the importance of everything that we do. And the more that we bring visibility to the challenges that we face or how to overcome them, the stronger the community becomes to rise together.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. So reminding everyone here to fill out that networking deck for today's event so you can even connect with the peers that are attending today. And I want to pass it over to Bernice to start asking some of the Q&A to our panelists today.
I love this panel so far. I've been like totally in on everything you guys been saying, so many wisdoms, and I love the authenticity of your stories. I mean, it's so incredibly touching, and I know the panel, all the attendees are super engaged right now and asking a lot of questions. So the first one I'm going to ask, which I kind of saw as a common thread, is about cultural differences. Being Asian in a Western environment, how did you guys navigate kind of those cultural things like, you know, not speaking up or saving face or respecting your elders? How did you kind of deal with that as kind of your journey in your career?
We will practice the code switching. Code switching is everything. I see everyone nodding. I mean, like, you know, I mean, I grew up in England, right? So, you know, it's what you had to do to survive in a lot of workplaces when we first started working, a lot of us, right? I think everyone still does it now, but you know, it's even how you talk. It's how it's, you know, Jatinda might have more reference to this as someone who also grew up in England, like to add class to the mix. Mm-hmm. Add class, your voice changes. If you don't code switch in a room, you're seen so differently. And that's how a lot of things had to be done back, well, I say back then, I still think it exists right now. But you just have to be your true voice now. I don't think you're going to get anywhere like that, because I think everyone sees that. And I think you'll get further to all the advice that everyone's given by just speaking your truth and being your own voice, because code switching is, I think, done more damage to us as a community than anything else, because it's prevented us being who we really are.
You know, I agree with that, and would build upon that. You know, the code switch gets very interesting. You know, So in the UK, I've been in the US for 20 years. I shortened my name in the professional space because people are like, what's your name? How do you spell it? How do you pronounce it? So a lot of people call me Jat because it was easier for people. So I just sort of I made myself small just by my name even, right? So you add that to the mix. And then again, sort of linguistically, and again, I think it's speaking up. I was at a meeting a few years ago, and I've become very good friends with the CEO of the India office. And we were in a room, and it was all CEOs, and she and I just started speaking Hindi to each other. And everyone just looked at us, and I was like, what's wrong? We're just having a conversation. Literally, people were just looking at us, and we just started speaking in Hindi to one another. That's probably one of the first times that I've done that, because I just felt comfortable doing it. So again, sort of don't make yourself seem small. I made myself small through my name, and then made myself small by not sort of actually speaking one of the languages that I can talk with a person who's gone on to become a good friend of mine. As I said, she's the CEO of our India office. So it's a process, and it took me some time to get there. But again, just stand proud and be who you are.
That's so great. Earlier we talked about microaggressions. How do you guys deal with microaggressions in the workplace?
I used to be angry, I hate to say, when people would ask me questions that I thought were dumb. And then I realized when I got older that it's a teachable moment. There's certain things do piss me off still, but now I realize when people are asking, they're taking a little bit of a risk. And so I now give them what they call grace, unless it's an absolutely absurd question, but a lot of this is judgment calls, but I do think that there are teachable moments. So when people ask me things like, Bill, do you know a really good sushi place? I do. So, I will tell them where the best sushi place is, but I will say, that you might want to check with other people. I'm just one perspective, but let me give you a little bit of information about me. I wasn't born in Japan. I was born here. So I do take a little bit of time to explain things. And I think that we should do whatever we can to tell people a little bit about who we are. And what's nice about this format is that we're all telling these remarkable stories that we should be telling other people. And those people should be allowing us to tell our stories because they're rich. And so I look at microaggressions as a way to provide a teachable moment for people.
I think that's so great. Anytime people ask me where I'm from, I usually just say I'm from America. But yes, and I'll be like, well, my parents are from. But yes, I totally agree. Some people just don't know what they don't know, and teaching them in a way that they can understand, I feel like gets us to a solution faster than just being angry. So
and we're too PC in our country. I think we worry about offending people now, and my feeling is this PC culture doesn't allow us to be genuine. Like Jatinda said earlier, if we want to be our genuine selves, we got to not be so PC. Just say what we think and how we feel, and people should be willing to accept that. And if they don't, we have got to find a way to help them do that.
That's great. Another question we have is, how do you guys react to when people say, oh, we already have enough Asians in this company, or, Asians aren't really a minority. We should support, Black and Latinos and not Asians?
If they could tell you where you're from, that might be the starting point. I mean, look, here's it goes back to the thing. If you have so many Asians in your company, they've grouped how many countries? If we don't come from here, how many countries have they grouped together? Even the very concept of the idea they've got too many Asians in their companies shows how narrow-minded they are about race and its construct, a construct that they created in the first place. They've grouped what? If you've Asia, they've grouped people from Lebanon to Japan through. You have not got any diversity as a company. You can never have enough Asians, have enough any peoples, so they shouldn't be shutting the door on any of us. It's just the stupidest thing. They make a box for us, and that's how they encapsulate us. You know, just, you know, if they don't want to let you in, make your own table. At that point, you just know that they just don't want to let you in. So it's time to make your own table and break their, you know, their poxy concept of us.
And it's also how many of your senior leaders are Asian, right? If you've got too many Asians in your organization, how many of them are C-suite? How many of them control a P&L and are actually able to manage that without, you know, the bullshit that some of us probably face on a daily basis? So when I get that push, I always fight back, because I don't think, you know, my current leadership team isn't diverse enough, and we push on that all the time. And we talk about that openly, and we have to be able to. So if anybody ever says that, you know, you look up at the leadership of the organization, and if it's not inclusive and it's not representative of the diversity that should be there, that's the problem to solve, not I have too many Asians.
Thank you for that. And I think we have time for one last question. So beyond just speaking up, what other piece of advice would you give to someone that's trying to get to this elusive C-suite position?
Yeah, I'll share one. Beyond speaking up about what you want, I think one thing as a community we don't talk a lot about is compensation and money, right? So to know what you're worth at the level that you're at and what you should be asking for from a salary and a compensation point of view, I think that's a huge part of it. Because I think a lot of people, they don't think that we're gonna ask for the bigger salary. And I remember my first time negotiating my first salary, I was so nervous about it, like shaking on the phone. But like, the more that I think people openly share, right, it starts to help unlock what you should be worth. So I think that's a big thing for the community to take on and support each other in, because without that awareness, it's almost impossible to negotiate yourself to a place where you're getting equitable pay.
And try not to do this if you're able to. And I know it's a cultural thing for many people, but a lot of people come up to me and for salary reviews, and most often they're Asian American, and they'll say, "Bill, I'm really sorry to waste your time. Can I have a few minutes to talk to you? I know you're busy." I think we should not apologize for asking what we want. We should not apologize for spending a little extra time in a review. We shouldn't apologize for what we believe we're worth. And like Michelle said, this is a skill set that we must learn. You are worth something. And if you believe you're worth more than what you're getting, please, by all means, ask for it and don't apologize.
I would just build on that thought of don't be apologetic or too shy or too modest to talk about the impact that you've had on the work that you have done. So make sure you have 3 things that you know that you can own. I've delivered X for X. I, helped architect whatever for whatever. Because I think as a culture, generalizing, we get a little bit too professionally modest to be quite clear on the impact we're having on a business. And as a CEO, I love that. I want to know the impact that you're having, and that equates to the contribution to the company. And that's incredibly important. You pair that with not apologetically asking for salary, you have an irrefutable data-driven case for why you deserve to ask to get what you're asking for.
Tell your own story. Like, so many average people who go in and like become writers out there who are not from our communities. Like, tell your own story, control your own narrative. I think Michelle Obama said that best, right? Like, don't let anybody else do it for you. Like, anyone can write their own story now. Like, we have so many more platforms, and you can control your own voice. You can tell your own story now in a way that people used to be able to control in a narrative. Like, when I started my career, I was a journalist in 2001. I'm thinking like how hard it was to get into a newspaper. You have so many platforms and opportunities to like shape your own narrative, to control how people see you. Tell your own story, because that'll be one of the quickest ways you rise up. Like, I'm blessed to have a column somewhere right now, and I still write. A lot of it's around justice work, but everything from Medium to Twitter to TikTok, I see people right now who reach out to me through all sorts of platforms and like share their life stories. Like I have a program to employ the formerly incarcerated. They don't reach out to me through our talent team. Our talent team still has a lot of work to do at RGA to figure that out. Like they reach out to me through other platforms, and they tell their story. They share their potential. Everyone's experience is valid. So if you own your own narrative, that is a powerful thing. Don't let another company do it for you. Don't let another person do it for you. Because if you tell that, people will see you for who you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone on this panel. There's so many great insights and takeaways. I wish we had time for all the questions, but this panel went so fast. Thank you so much.
God, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're just wrapping up this meeting real quick to get you guys back to your day. Asians in Advertising, we have submitted a South by Southwest panel picker. So we would love to have your vote and your support. We are gonna basically talk about Asian cultural differences. Our talk is called Solving for the Asian Dilemma.
Awesome.
And, you know, we're all about making tangible events for you guys. So you guys have, you know, ways to level up your career in ways that are totally, you know, have great takeaways. So coming up on September 16th, Jesslyn will lead Network with Ease. I know something about like being Asian, you're like so scared to ask for help, and kind of how do you kind of navigate talking to strangers and building a strong network of mentor and allies. And our final event is October 21st. It's called Find Your Voice. This is a workshop event. It's 2 hours with Kenny, who is a CEO and a longtime presenter. He is going to take you through presentation tips, how to build a successful argument, how to present it, how to deliver it. So, you know, definitely check out these events. These are free for the community. And, you know, we really hope these help you in your work. And just keep networking. You know, we're here to build a solid network for you guys to feel like you're not in isolation. Use that deck, reach out to the panelists. We are here for you as well. And we also have a private LinkedIn group. This has actually been a great place for people to find leads on jobs so far and get some advice. So we will send all these links through our follow-up email as well as a recording of this talk. And lastly, we want to hear from you. If there's something that you are feeling passionate about and you wish we would cover, definitely share with us and we would definitely bring it up for a future event. But thank you so much again to the panelists. Thank you so much for all these wisdoms and insights. I learned a whole lot, so thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thank
Bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.